Back to Lohmann. Lohmann on the left. 2 in a minute. Around the body, Charlie Cameron. That's why. Look at that.
Lohmann from 30 and closing. He goals. Lohmann's kicked 3 in a grand final in the first half. Back to Hipwood. He's a left footer, remember. Gets back on that left now. Lines them up. It's coming back. How did he kick that from there? They are on fire. They are up by 35 points. Off hands, maybe not, because Ashcroft has ensured that they continue to surge on. Danaher from a long way out. Rayner! Ashcroft. All the big names. Bailey to Danaher. Danaher, the final stamp on the day.
The Brisbane Lions fancast is back. It is now officially your premiership podcast because that's right, baby. Brisbane Lions are the 2024 Premiers in amongst the most unlikely circumstances. 0-3, 2-5. They lost to Hawthorn just before the bye. The raging 9 in a row, then 2 heartbreaking losses. Down by 44 against the Giants in the semi, down by 25 against Geelong in the prelim, and then just absolutely mint Sydney in a grand final that I don't think many people saw coming, but it all results in us being the premiers. It resulted in some bloody fantastic moments for a lot of people that we're going to get to chat about in this podcast. I do want to, before we get into it, a huge thank you to everyone that's listened across the year, and of course to Hop On Brewery Tours and Crisp Communications for their support and belief in us this year as well, because it's helped host a website, it's helped host the podcast, it's kept the lights on and kept things running, and it's been absolutely amazing. And there isn't a single person sitting right here or listening as a Lions fan that didn't have their doubts across the year at some point. But here we are. Here we bloody are, Patrick. I've landed back in Brisbane last night after one of the maddest dashes to the grand final. But I'm back sitting in front of the microphone after being at your house 24 hours ago. How good was that?
I feel like you've done a bit of a Paul Roos. Here it is. I think the second quarter was just like, okay, we've won. And I think just the realization in that quarter, and then obviously it kind of stretched into the third quarter, it kind of meant that it was just like similar to the players. They were just basically celebrating on the field. And I think everyone just sort of felt a palpable weight lift off their shoulders, I'd say, as much as anything. I don't know. There wasn't quite like, it didn't feel in the crowd like there was sort of like an outpouring of emotion on the final siren. It was sort of just, it built up throughout the game, and people were sort of just, we saw people in tears and people mega drunk and people running around and people, all the things that you would expect. But just, yeah, everybody in the crowd, everybody on the field had their own little moment or their own way to sort of digest it and stuff like that. And I think that's really cathartic and important for the fan base and for the people that were there, and particularly for people that were there last year and players that were there last year and stuff like that. So it's sort of, it's a bit like, people say you grieve in your own way, but you sort of celebrate in your own way as well. So it's kind of like the other side of that coin. And it was just so cool to see. You can tell my voice is still like, raw from the game. But I mean, I don't know, to experience that for me was like important, because obviously it was my third grand final and the first time I saw them win. And to experience that with my partner and with you was really, really special to me. So I really appreciated that. So
yeah,
that was a bit of a rambling mess to start off from me, but would we want to have it any different?
No, and I guess a lot of people are just sort of still in rambling phase at the moment because there's a lot to comprehend. And I think you're right when you were saying the overwhelming feeling when that siren went was just relief, because I think even in the second quarter where we just played flawless footy, we went into halftime 40 odd points up, 40 plus, and there would have been so many Lions supporters around the ground going, we're obviously in a great position, but we've been here before. Sydney will have their time, So let's just cool our jets. There would have been a few people and definitely a few neutrals that, a lot of people pointed to the Eric Hipwood goal. When they say, when Eric Hipwood is kicking goals like that, you're on and there's no coming back from that. Maybe the Archie goal was probably the sealer. But, no lead is too safe, as we've seen, because we've been on both ends of it this year. So it probably wasn't until the third quarter where we went in at three-quarter time, 73 points up, where you thought, okay, it's going to take something pretty bloody monumental here from Sydney, who have not given a yelp today, for us to balls this up. And fourth quarter was just party time. It was just party time, and you're hearing all the the interviews from separate people over the last couple of days, and Cam Rayner was like, I just tried to get as far away from the bench as possible, turn my back to it because I was not coming off. I wanted to be on the field, and it ended up with like the young fellas, the kids on the bench at the time by the time the siren went, and
that's that lack of grand final experience for you.
Yeah, just like it was just amazing. Like the fourth quarter, it's sort of, I guess, a bit of an indictment on Sydney and the game if you're in neutral, that you can spend the last quarter singing bloody DJ Otzi and Country Roads because you've got it made. Very, very different experience to last year's grand final. I didn't get any blood pressure alerts on my watch this year. It was relatively smooth sailing. And
there was one time you checked me, and that was in about the first quarter, and that was it.
Yeah.
Was it?
I think so, yeah, because I was feeling pretty much the same. I mean, Sydney kicked the first two goals, obviously, so we will get into the game sort of quarter by quarter and how it all unfolded. Obviously, only the one change for the Lions, and that was Ford in, Oscar McInerney out in heartbreaking fashion, but we all sort of saw that coming a mile away. Sydney, they remained unchanged, so Mills didn't make the team. They went in with Logan McDonald, which obviously a silly mistake by them, and Heaney, who was clearly underdone as well, but we had plenty of players out there as well that were battling injury. Obviously, Lockie Neal with
fracture Heaney.
Yeah.
Cry me a river.
Lockie Neal with his foot. Hippie with his osteitis pubis. But they all did.
We called that way ages ago.
I mean, anyone could see it, how different he was after that week or two off, and he finally came back and he just was not anywhere near himself. But just flawless. I mean, as I said to you during the game, it's like that game against the D's in the MCG, yeah, they came back a little bit in the last quarter. The Bulldogs game, straight after the bye, the Port Adelaide game, I mean, the Richmond game, which is an outlier for different reasons, but just foot to the floor the whole time. Tackling pressure was amazing. Ball use, we chip kicked when we needed to. We went hard when we needed to. It was just a full four-quarter performance, and not something you can say about the Brisbane Lions over the last couple of years, but on the biggest stage, we got it done.
Yeah, it's one of those ones where you just... Yeah, I mean, like, there's sort of two games. You look at when the game was kind of in the balance, and then sort of what led to us being 70 points ahead, and then the rest, which doesn't, it's kind of rather inconsequential, more for its moments. But, when you sit and pick up the paper and read that allegedly Brodie Grundy was like the fourth highest ranked player on the field, and you're like, yeah, well, did he get a medal? No. Did he get towelled by a second string ruckman for the second time in a grand final in his career? Yes. Sucked in. So
I think a lot of that was on the back of his fourth quarter, where there was a few Sydney players that obviously fought out the whole game. Warner, Parker, and Brodie Grundy all had last quarters that were big, but it was obviously way too little too late by then, because we were too busy celebrating on the sidelines. There were, blokes hugging when the game's in play on the other wing. Brandon Starcevic running past the bench, giving the big fists to the crowd and to the rest of the team.
That's where I'm calling at some point in the next couple of years there'll be like weighted ranking or weighted disposal, depending on game state, which, it kind of just goes to show. I mean, we were talking about it before the game. We're looking in the record or whatever, and it's like Chad Warner has like the second highest ranked grand final of all time, and it's like you got beaten by 80 points in 2022. Like Simon Black, what was it, 39 disposals?
Yep, best part of 10 tackles, couple of goals.
It's like, okay, cool. It's like cool. you can have that.
Yep.
It just shows how flawed, the ranking system kind of can be when the game's dead and you're just running around trying to pad out your stats to make it so that you don't look very bad. I have a question about Chad Warner. What's wrong with his face?
What do you mean? Like the way he talks is he's something going on with his mouth, but I don't know.
Well, it's like the left half of his face doesn't work.
Oh, look, I'm not going to speculate on what's going on with Chad Warner's face. He's a brilliant footballer, but yeah, strange guy.
I tried looking it up. Nothing. It's as if no one's noticed it. I'm like, does he have Bell's palsy? Is he like Jim Ross from the wrestling? I don't know. But it's weird because he gave a very strange interview. I don't know if you saw it, to Sydney. And he looked way too smug for a dude that just got pumped in a grand final. So anyway, let's get on to our blokes because
that could just be his face. I'm not here to sink the boot into Sydney. But one thing I did preface before the show, and it's a stat that's been flying around. Not a lot of people would have seen this, but you haven't. So if you were to guess how many 60-plus point losses John Longmire has had in his career as coach of the Swans, how many would you say?
I reckon like 6.
6. And 3 of them have been grand finals.
Okay. That was a good guess. Because I was thinking the 3 grand finals, and I was like the Port Adelaide one, and then 2 over a decade.
Well, yeah, 2 over another, 12 years or something, which is obviously incredible, amazing consistency and something that Sydney's known for. And, Lockie addressed it, Chris Fagen addressed it in the immediate aftermath, like something we are trying to model ourselves on.
Emulate.
Yeah. So, but they've obviously got, I'm not going to say a history, but they've got an uncanny knack of just cooking grand finals. That's 2 and 3 years plus 2014 when they got belted by Hawthorn. The Bulldogs loss was, 20-odd points. And that sort of blew out at the end when they knew it was done and there was junk time goals and partying for the Bulldogs. But still, a lot of those grand finals, they've gone in as favourites and just haven't been able to get it done. And, that's their lot to deal with. I certainly don't envy them. I don't envy the Swan supporters that, made the trip down from Sydney just to... We've spoken about it here. There's nothing more demoralising than having your team not show up.
Well, I think you said... when we were like getting ready for the game, you're like, I hope it doesn't end up with us watching Simpsons later on tonight at your house. And it basically was the same, but we were watching the replay of the game.
Yeah.
So, big difference. And I was full of Thai food.
Yes. And I there was lots of chat, leading into the game of how, and I really wanted to meet as many listeners as possible. I managed to catch a few, and Gabriella, who was sitting behind us, had a nice chat to her.
That was funny because she recognized me from my voice.
That's crazy.
Not from my face. So she's like, are you the guy from the podcast? I'm like, yeah. Yeah. And she's like, I recognize your voice. I was like, that's the strangest thing that's happened. But she was lovely. She had a good chat to myself and my partner. She'd had a great day. She met Dom Fay on the walk up, and she was just looked nervous, but I think had a pretty good time in the end of it. So it was. That's the first time that's happened to me. I'm not really around people all that often. Like you being like, this is where I sit at the Gabba. I just lurk.
Yeah.
So, it was pretty funny.
But yeah, straight after the game, we sort of didn't know what to do, and then we ended up we want to watch the replay, so we just got some Thai food and went straight back. I had a couple of cheeky bevos while I watched that, and it was a good time had by all. And since then, I've just been trying to absorb as much bloody footy content about this game as I possibly can. And the good thing about there only being one game is that there's plenty to talk about, and a lot of it is in our favour. Rightly, there is a lot of criticism towards Sydney, and I don't know if you haven't watched the Sunday Footy show yet, but Lloydie was pretty scathing about... He's just like, I hated that grand final, and he said, nothing to do with Brisbane, you did your bit, but God. And I can understand as a neutral, and I said that to you at some point during the game as well. I was like, watching this on TV must be pretty horrible.
Well, think about how many bad ones there have been, like, do you have any fond memories about like 2019 or 2022?
Well, 2022 was a funny one because I was actually at a wedding that day and I was absolutely pissing blood at someone that had obviously not a footy fan, but organised their wedding on grand final day. And lucky enough, it was like a fairly quiet sort of affair. It was like in their front yard and it was just like drinks in a garden type operation. So I was watching it on my phone, but I was sitting there going, I'm actually not that sad. I've missed this game in its entirety because I've watched it all in 10 minutes essentially. So yeah. I can understand why people would be disappointed watching this game. But, for us, amazing. Real, like, 03 vibes.
Yeah, it's a sort of one where, like, going back and watching 03 recently, it's good and then it's just mental. Yeah. And this one, I think, is an exercise in watching the first half and then it's done. And then you can just kind of pick up the goals because, I mean, there's one moment right at the end, which I find to be probably the most hilarious moment of the game. And we'll come to that in the fourth quarter. But, like, yeah, it was pretty tight in the first quarter. And, we were inaccurate. And I think, it was funny being at a game with Brisbane people from Brisbane and seeing, like, their, like, tangible scars of behinds going in and, like, oh, no, it's happening again. And you're like, because I just sit there and I have my, like, optimistic hat on, which is contrary to what most people think. I'm sitting there going, all right, well, we're playing well, we're moving the ball well. And then they go bang, bang and kick the first 2 goals and you're sitting there going, oh. Yeah. All right. But, previewing the game last week, we definitely thought that we were going to be kind of definitely in the ascendancy ahead and behind the ball. We had no idea their midfield wouldn't show up.
Well, that's it. And, leading into the game, there was a few things I was certain of. And the first one being there was no way that their key forwards were going to have the game they had in the prelim. Like, there's no way Amadi, McDonald, especially McDonald on, one leg, and McLean were going to kick 2-3 goals each against our back line. That was a non-issue in the end. And obviously that big three, Warner, Goulden and Heaney, is a worry for any team that comes up against them. And I said to you during the game, I was like, I'm just glad we haven't been torn up by those guys. If nothing else, we have not been absolutely smashed by the players we knew would come here and potentially smash us. So job's well done all over the ground. But yeah, that first quarter, the first set shot for a lot of Lions fans is like, all right, this is going to set the tone. And it's Charlie. It's 25 out on a very slight angle, and he misses, and then Joe misses, and you're like, oh no. As you said, we're doing enough here, but we are leaving the door open, and that has been obviously an issue for us across the year. So, that worry is there. But Kai Lohmann, and like we'll have a bit of an extended chat about Kai Lohmann during the show, obviously. But not just him, all the kids. Like, the kids really stood up. Like Morris, Ashcroft, obviously. But we knew Lohmann was set for, like, these games, the big games. Just his nature, his celebrations, the way he conducts himself, the high-flying marks, the mercurial goals. Like, you just know he's built for this stage, and he delivered in spades. And he was this close to going to Hawthorn or Essendon, but this close to going to Hawthorn. And can you imagine Kai Lohmann in that Hawthorn forward line with Ginnivan and Moore and McDonald and all those other big celebrators? He would have fit right in, but he chose to stick around because he broke his collarbone and just felt the love from the Lions and wanted to stick around on, I would imagine, less money because we probably hadn't budgeted for it. Like Chris Fagen said, I thought he was gone. I thought him and Dev were gone. So it was sort of a bonus that they stuck around. And what a year he's had and what a final series he's had.
Yeah, there are some interesting stories regarding, individual awards, let's say. You probably read the thing about Harris Andrews, which just sort of said, to McGovern and Wiedering, enjoy your Blazers, boys. But you're not the best defenders in the league. No chance. And a bit like that with Kai Lohmann. And, I'm probably not the biggest fan of the fact that third-year players could go in the Rising Star, which is the Telstra Rising Star, not the NAB Rising Star.
Oh, really?
I probably got it wrong all year.
Oh, whatever.
I still think it should probably be, capped at the first 2-year players. But, Ollie Dempsey had a fine season, but Kai Lohmann scored a lot of fucking goals.
Yeah.
and scored 4 in a grand final and was really pivotal in like pulling us through that first portion of the game. There were a handful of players, but the two standouts for me were Kai Lohmann and Starcevic that really like Starcevic. I've made no qualm. Like, I'm not great at watching the game at ground level. I struggle to see what the hell is going on. I like my skybox.
Yep.
Just looking down on the tower at the ants running around. Didn't get that. Tried to. Thanks, Ballot. But in the pit. And but Starcevic's bald head was everywhere in that first quarter. Intercepts, tackles, ground ball gets. He'd gone to the Noah Answorth School of Vacuum Cleaning, as had Zorko in that game as well. So whatever they're doing to kind of fix that ground ball effort, which was something that has been a weakness for us. Starcevic and Lohmann really were the two that were like either end of the ground and really not kept us in the game but just they allowed us to settle.
Yeah. And then just Kai Lohmann with the spark that we needed to get the energy, get us on the board, more importantly, with a couple of majors, like 2 in a minute or whatever it was to kick things off. And then it was the
second goal was beautiful. Him just realising he had the space to run into. And
then on left, on the non-preferred, just straight through. And then it was the other like standout moment from that first quarter was obviously that Hugh McCluggage kick straight down the guts to Ryan Lester, who when you watch the Sunday Footy Show, you'll find out that it was actually Ryan Lester that started that play, like in very, very deep defence. He had one chip kick to, I think it could have been Zorko. The next kick was to McCluggage, and in that whole time, Froggy's just, sprinting down the middle of the ground to find himself because no one ran with him, and that was the story of the day for Sydney. He just didn't want to be there. Found himself in the middle of the ground, forward to centre to set up that kick to Archie. Amazing.
Yeah.
That was it. That was the moment where you thought, all right, we are on here today.
Yeah, I think that might even have been, I was reading a thread that was like, when did you know that, you were going to get blown away in a grand final? And a couple of Sydney people from the game said, I think even though we were ahead, when we saw the ease that they were chip kicking through the ground, they were like, we're in all sorts of trouble here. McCluggage, was another one. He was probably one of the most impactful midfielders, so much so that...
well, that was it. Jordan,
James Jordan had to go to him. So.
Had the role on Zorko and was doing a pretty good job on Zork. Zork still had he had a good game. He wasn't one of his standout games that he's had, but he had no one had a bad game. Everyone did their role. It was
an exercise in going, well, who are you going to let kick the ball out of D50? Yeah. Like, pick your poison, because they're all pretty good at it. And like when you got dudes like McCluggage cropping up in the defensive 50 to distribute. Good luck. And we saw that in the Geelong game as well. Picking off the kick there to Zach Bailey and some ones through the corridor and stuff like that. But just the timing and things like that was just so impressive, for that transition. So, yeah, the first quarter, also the Nick Blakey high, whatever, just keep playing, dude. Don't dig your head in like a... He really does run like a lizard, doesn't he?
Yeah, he really does.
Yeah, I'll try and post a GIF on the Discord of what he like. There's a moment later on in the game, the third quarter, where you're like, "Whoa!"
Yeah,
he scuttles.
Yeah, like a lizard on a boiling hot desert sand, just like yeah. And that's where the name obviously comes from. But yeah, that first quarter, it's like nice and close. Papley with a lucky goal, and that was the last time we saw anything from him. A nice set shot from James Rowbottom on the 50, and he said, what is it with teams kicking goals from like outside or on 50 against us in grand finals? But that was
the way that arrowed back into the goal. Just gave me absolute flashbacks from last year. So I was, it's hard to not notice that kind of shit when you dealt with it last year. But and then Charlie Cameron. Yeah, from the boundary line, just put it in. Namaste. Everyone loved it.
Yeah, that was a strange one from Charlie. I didn't expect that. I was fully expecting the Harley or something a bit more up and about. But cheeky little just bow to the crowd, which was... and, when he took that mark, you can see the because from our view, right behind the Lions goals, you got a good view at the bench, and you can see the big 30 signs that they're holding up. So like, well, he's got to hurry up about it here, and obviously did, and got us a handy lead leading into quarter time, and then second quarter was just punishment. 7 goals, 4 to 1 goal 2 or something, and that 1 goal was from a very, very, very dubious 50-metre call against Zorko to Robbie Fox. So it was utter domination. Like, there was just utter domination in every facet. Our pressure was above 200, hit the scoreboard in big ways, moved the ball at ease. You know, all the numbers, every single number was just heading our way. And for both teams, I think Sydney is like 8-0 when they get 100 plus marks, and we're 13-1 or something like that. So by the first quarter, we had 42 of them. So we were well on track. And I know it's just
counting them off.
Yeah. And by the end, we ended up with like 150 to 160, which was like the highest in a grand final or something like that. And you're just thinking to yourself, what is happening here? What is happening here? Just what's unfolding in front of us? Like, you know, McCluggage just kicking goals. Yeah, Archie with another huge, like, he's got to be close to being our finals player of the year, you'd have to think. Just really solid and obviously severely underrated.
It's one of those ones where I think he might not win the votes, but if you looked at it retrospectively of like who made the biggest impact across finals, it's sort of, it kind of, well, points out the flaws in systems where you vote every game.
Yeah.
Let's not talk about certain Senor Brownlow, but you know, where you can look at an entire kind of sample size of work rather than, you know, each individual one. But I mean, the second quarter was a bit of an arm wrestle. Like, you know, although they didn't get any scoreboard return except for that bullshit 50, which
they were getting plenty of inside 50s, and at halftime they were up.
Yeah.
And by the end of the game, they were only down by 2, but we doubled their score.
Well, we know from early on in the season that, you know, you can have an inside 50 that lands at the 49-metre mark, and that still counts. So, but yeah, really the second half of that quarter, and just after last year, the amount of goals we scored in red time was so satisfying, because I think that still throughout the year has been something that we've not been the best at. You know, we've leaked goals in red time. We've probably scored goals, so it probably is somewhere in the middle, and it's just that you remember the ones that are frustrating. But yeah,
well,
what did we score?
I mean, you look back at the grand final last year, and then at quarter time and half time, you know, De Goey after the siren on the 50, Crisp after the siren on the 50. Like that, like I'll remember those for as long as I can. But obviously the other way this year, and you know, they got plenty of ball, but our back six, like how many times did I say to you across the game, our back six has just been phenomenal all day. And it was an absolute crime that Starcevic didn't get a single vote in the Norm Smith voting, because he would have had close to 10 marks across the day. And a lot of that was in the first half when the game was up for grabs. And, you know, Neil and McCluggage, especially in that first half, were huge, and obviously Ashcroft. And the thing I noticed the most when it came to the midfielders is Neil got a lot more outside ball. Like, how many running bounces did he have across the day? Like, that must be a PB for him. He was getting, like, there was a time where he's at fullback taking a saving mark in the goal square, got the ball everywhere, and for a bloke who's clearly got a heel that is fucked, he was everywhere.
I feel like everybody after the game should go and have a physical done, just so you can be like, okay, well, how injured was Isaac Heaney compared to Lachie Neale? Not very. Shut up.
Like, what was it?
I want the I want the side by side. I want the McLean. Is it McLean with the ankle, or is it McDonald?
McDonald with the ankle, yeah.
Mick, one of them, Mick ankle. I want him next to Payne. I want all that stuff to be like, here's how injured they were versus how injured their opponents were, just so that, you know, no excuses.
Well, and
we weren't making excuses last year when we had Dev Rob with a broken hand.
No. And it's come out, like, all this stuff is coming out after, you know, Hip with the OP, and Neil with, like, the extent of this injury, how he was crawling around his house during the week because it was so cooked, and he had an MRI after the Geelong game but didn't want to look at the results because he just wanted to get through this week. And he said he felt it snap or something snap in the last quarter, and just like, no, I'm getting this done. because clearly.
But then also, like, conversely was like, but I didn't want to go to the bench.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
just wanted to stay out and run around. So priorities, which is, yeah, it's all pretty good. But yeah, that second quarter was like, it was an arm wrestle in territory, but it wasn't, once like we kicked a few behinds. Once Joe kicked that goal, holy shit!
Yeah,
it was on. Like it was absolutely on. Because Kyle Lohmann kicked a
lovely running goal.
I mean, I'm not loath to say this, but a lot of people would be loath to hear it Ackermanis-esque from the pocket of that side of the MCG. We've seen that over the years, and Bailey Bailey was pretty understated. I'd sort of say Bailey was almost like a role player for the day.
Yeah,
he did his job and he made no mistakes. His disposal efficiency was extremely high for him.
Yeah,
and penetrating kicks and stuff like that. But yeah, Lohmann from the boundary. What a goal! And then budget eyewear goal of the day.
And then Eric Hipwood with the actual Ackermanis celebration after he gets the ball, falls over as he's trying to put it on his right boot, and then just goes, well, here we go, drop punt from the corner, and it just somehow floats through and then hits the Acker celebration. That's like, I don't know what he's thinking in that moment to pull out a celebration from the early 2000s from Acker, but that was fantastic.
So we had Joe Gold and Cal Gold from centre bounce. And then when I think it was Hipwood that weird Joe one where he like bundled it over the line or whatever. But Jared Berry had a set shot from 45 metres and he absolutely...
That never looked like missing. That was straight through the middle. And, the week leading in, you just knew how much that meant to him and to everyone.
I'll be honest, when he kicked that goal, I thought there's no way we're losing. Like when Jared Berry kicked that goal, I was like, nah, it's... Because we've seen his goal kicking has been... It's 50-50.
Yep.
Yeah. And I just think shit like that happens in a grand final. You're not losing. It's just not happening. So that to me, I honestly felt like that was the moment where it's like we're not losing this game. And I think the sealer was probably 2 goals later.
Still at halftime, I was very, very nervous, and I caught up with an old mate that I used to work with when I lived in Melbourne, and he was telling me, as a lot of people, he's telling me, "Nah, you guys got this. You'll shit this in." I was like, "Nah, mate, come on. There's still plenty of footy to go. Sydney will have their time," but it just never came, and it was absolutely...
Turned out Sydney would not have their time.
No, and I can only imagine what's going through all that, their players' minds at the moment, but that's not really for us to worry about. It was just extraordinary stuff. Before we get into the third quarter and the last half of the game, I'm going to give a shout out here to a bloke called James Collins who shot me an email before the game and said, he said, long-time listener, first-time caller, ex-Kenmore Bears boy here. Lovely.
Hey, me too. I played under 8s at Kenmore Bears.
Nice.
And Auskick in 90... How old am I? 97, 98? Yeah. Then I went to Jindalee Jaguars.
Oh, hello.
They did a bit of a merge. It was weird. I don't know what happened, but anyway, James Collins. Sorry.
He shared us an email before the game. He said, "Look, I've really wanted to make a documentary collating footage since the granny last year he's been doing, but he didn't necessarily have all the resources and time and finances, and fair enough. But what he has done is made a series of shirts, and these are fantastic so far. So at the time of recording, it was 10 o'clock on a Monday morning. He's got a couple of Fagen shirts and Zorko shirts. He's planning to do like a whole line for everyone in the team. He's got a Danaher one coming as well, and you can find them. We're going to share the links at our socials at Instagram, Twitter, all that sort of stuff. I'm going to share the link at our website as well, brisbanelionsfancast.com.au, istances.theprintbar.com. And then so far there's this Fagen one, the Fagen Premiership Naysayer, and then Zorko the Magician, which is fantastic. You got to check these shirts out and obviously support and buy one of these if you've got the means to. Like I said, we'll check the links up. So a huge shout out to James for listening and for putting the time into this, because these are great.
Yeah, I like them. They're very kind of they sort of have a bit of the feel of, if anyone remembers those, like that Chalky Neal shirt.
Yeah, the Carlton Draft style shirts, yeah.
Yeah, they kind of, it's sort of almost like a clumsy art style that I think really works. It lends itself so well to this kind of a thing, and I really, really like it. So,
all right, second half. This is where I think nerves weren't exactly at an all-time high, but there was definitely reservations. And then 7 goals to 1 in the second quarter, 5 goals to 1 in the third, and it was during the third where you knew, all right, this is it. This is done. And there was a couple of what we called like full circle moments across the game, where there was a Joe Danaher streaming down the left wing, bouncing the ball leading into 50, and I immediately went to that Collingwood game where he butchered the second bounce, and it got turned over in the end. But he squared up, found Cal Archie, and the other one was also involving Cal Archie streaming into goal, with Nick Blakey trailing behind him, and very much like the game at the Gabba where he was streaming into goal. Didn't panic, but couldn't hear that he had enough time to roll with it. This time he made sure of it, went all the way through, and it was just
shoulder checks.
Yeah, and you just sort of thought, oh wow, these are some nice little full circle moments for the team that, yeah, it just adds to the beauty of this whole experience that we're going to get this done when those moments, those things we haven't got right across the year and the previous years, we are killing now.
I want to see some side-by-side footage of both of those moments, just for the fun of it. Yeah, just big game versus just a casual kickabout against fucking Collingwood. Who gives a shit? Just do it right when it matters. But yeah, I mean, definitely the Cal Archie goal was the absolute utter sealer.
Yeah.
You know, Stevie Wonder could tell that game was over and he didn't even watch. I don't know why he warrants a mention yet again. Yeah, that quarter kind of just, I mean, Heaney got he flopped trying to win a 50-metre penalty, and that kind of summed up his game.
I'm glad the umpire didn't fall for that one. I mean, aside from that 50, I thought the umpiring was really good. Like, I thought they did a well enough job to keep the whistle away when Blakey ducked his head and tried to go for that free kick. I thought it was largely fine. There was a couple of missed holding the balls, but that was both ways. I thought it was... I didn't leave that game going, God, the umpires made it about themselves today. I thought they were really good.
Yeah, I think there could have been some tackles that could have been rewarded in the first half, but it didn't really. It was inconsequential, so it doesn't really matter. But, yeah, I mean, the third quarter really just... We kept them to 2 goals in a half of football, and one of them was not a goal, really.
Yeah.
That's...
So we had...
as far as domination goes...
Well, we had Logan Morris chime in with a goal. We had a couple of special goals in that third quarter as well. The Will Ashcroft just leaving Errol Goulden for dead at the stoppage, which I actually managed to get on my phone, so I'll upload that at some point. Just clean off the bootlaces, off a step, straight through the middle. And then the Cam Rayner, huge mark in the pocket, and then finishing it off on the left as well. So,
did you have a little window of vision for that? Because where Storm and I was sitting, it was just between about 3 people's shoulders.
Yeah.
It was literally like an A4 paper size, and he's gone in there and taken the mark. And because we had a bit of a crazy person in front of us that kind of wanted to take a documentary footage of the whole game, which, I pay your money, that's all fine, but it was a little bit visual hazard, let's say.
I'm just jealous of that lady's phone battery, because she filmed just about every single moment. And good on her, she was having the time of her life and whatever. But that was another moment that Lloydie actually pointed out. I think it was Lloydie that pointed out where Nick Blakey just didn't want to go near Cam Rayner, didn't put any body on him whatsoever, just let him have the run and jump, and left a little bit embarrassed for the Liz there. So just, I mean, we could go on and on, but just that middle 2 quarters was just perfection. And then, as I said, the last quarter was just party time. The queue was in the rack. Sydney sort of bit back a little bit with a couple of goals from Parker and co, but whatever.
Just a bit of a swan song by Parker, you might say.
Yeah.
And then we had, in order to make it a nice round number, in the car I lost my mind just talking about all the multiples of whatever factors of the goal scoring. Ended up a nice even 60 to 120 with Joe Danaher kicking the last goal. There was a lot of helter-skelter nonsense football going on in that quarter, which was really funny. Just tap-ons and dumb stuff, and they're firing tracer bullets in from 50 all over the place. So no one is going to remember that last quarter at all. Bit like the sort of last 10 minutes of the Essendon grand final, where I think Lloydie kicked a goal and Scott Lucas decided he was going to kick like 5 goals or something, and you're like, bro, what's the point? Just stop. Like, it almost felt at 3/4 time that the teams were lining up to shake hands.
Yeah, it did a little bit,
That's how much it felt like it was done. But so I'm sure that this moment will live in the minds of everybody, but the chain of kicks on not the bench side, the far wing, where I think Lachie Neale kicks it to Harris and Dunkley's around, and they sort of, Lachie celebrates and kicks it to Frog and he celebrates, and then Lockie's having a hug with, I think, McCluggage and Dunkley or someone over on the far side. Well, the ball's still in play.
Yeah.
And then you've got on the near pocket someone, I think it might be Jack Payne or Zorko, roosting the ball to Starcevic in a 2-on-1 against, where he just has to sit under the ball. And you've got the juxtaposition of these guys celebrating and hugging on one side and Starcevic's big bald head in a 2-on-1 against, and he manages to bring the ball to ground and there's just no one there. And you're like, oh, buddy. So, I thought that's such a funny moment and kind of encapsulates him. And I'm really happy for Stars that, I've been I don't necessarily buy into the narrative that Bobby Hill tore him a new one last year, because I think there's a lot of circumstances around that.
Yeah, of course.
And I think that's a lazy way of looking at the game and looking at the matchups. It'd be like saying whoever was on Kai Lohmann had an absolute... I mean, they all had a nightmare, but it's too easy to sort of say that.
Yeah.
But it was good to see here that, the narrative of him, the ship of Starcevic, as I coined it early on in the season, the return of him to his kind of previous form, and all it took was a razor blade to the skull. So,
and it's weird. When we were watching the replay, we all said the same thing, as like, he still looks weird with a bald head, but then when you go back and see footage of him with hair, it looks even weirder. So it's sort of like, I don't know what's going to suit him, but I mean, the premiership cap at the end obviously suited him fair. And it was good to see him when they got back and they did the celebrations with the girls. He got a big moment with Craig Starcevic as well, which is obviously fantastic.
Yeah, I was about to mention Craig Starcevic, not bald. I mean, he might be bald now, but, watching some of the old stuff from the 2000s, he has a fine head of hair. They look remarkably similar.
Yeah.
It must be one of those families where just all the blokes look the same. So he's obviously got his mum's, dad's bald-headed genes. I don't know. But yeah, he does look a lot like Craig. But what's left to say in that quarter?
Not much. There's not much you can say about the last quarter, because it really just was party time wasting. Lachie Neale just chalking up junk time possessions at the very end until the siren went, and then just the outpouring of emotion from everyone. And we will get to, I guess, a couple of key plays at the very end of the game as well. But just to go right,
probably the best moment, I think, it could have been when Fagen went up on the big screen.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And just the roar from the crowd was really like almost guttural.
Yeah. Probably the biggest roar all day, during the game. Obviously, goals and stuff aside, like when his face popped up on the screen and he's still chewing away feverishly on the gum, and it took him until about 2 minutes left where he finally started, giving out hugs, and you could see the emotion get the best of him. That was special.
I think he had a chuckle when Joe kicked the goal at the end.
Yeah,
he had a smile on his face, but that was more or less the only time. So yeah, but you were going to mention Leicester, I think.
Yeah, I mean, we'll get to Froggy a little bit later on as well. But just to go back to the very beginning, like in the lead up to this game, I don't know how you were feeling, but I changed so often about how I was feeling. Like, you know, we've had the 3 away trips. We've been, you know, up against it the last 2 weeks, and then I would like immediately switch to, no, we're gonna do this. And it would just depend on like things I would read, things I would hear, you know, the superstitions of the touching the cup last, or the, you know, being on a certain side of the cup, and then I'd listen to Hoyne. He's like, you know, Brisbane's ground ball gets has gone up to 80% in finals. Like, they're still in the premiership window. They're number 2 for turnover scores from turnover. They're bloody, and all the numbers and stuff pointed towards Brisbane winning. And then sillily, I bought into that. Like, oh yeah, we're gonna do this. Like, we're going to, like, Hoyne says we're going to do it, so I'll buy into that. And then I'll check myself and go, come on, pull your head in. Like, this is Sydney, and look what they did to Port Adelaide last week. Look what they've done to numerous teams across the year. And then I would, you know, I'd wake up the next day and go, there's just something about this. I feel like we're just going to get it done. And then it turns out we got it done in fashions I don't think many Lions supporters would have thought. I thought for all money this was going to be another bloody butt clencher. This was going to be another close game that's going to come down to under a couple of goals. If there was going to be a blowout, I thought it was going to be Sydney. But, wow.
I think history probably tells you it would have been Sydney, which is strange because they've been on the receiving end. But just in terms of the teams and the circumstances of, you know, coming from outside the 4 and the extra game and stuff like that. But I was sort of thinking about it and going, okay, so we played our last game, home and away game against Essendon. Then we played Collingwood at home. Then we played GWS away.
Carlton at home.
Sorry, what did I say?
Collingwood. Carlton at home.
Oh, I say Carlton at home. They're all the same. Then GWS away, Geelong away, and then at Sydney neutral. And when you put it in that kind of perspective of going, so of our last 5 games, you got 2 home, 2 away, and 1 in a neutral ground. It puts it in a bit of perspective of like, it's, you know, a good team can win those games.
And our away record this year has been actually really good, especially compared to our home record where it was we lost our first 3 there. But I guess it's the nature, and I guess we'll never really know. You can hypothesize and look back at the lead-in for both teams. And Sydney didn't have to leave Sydney for, 5 or 6 weeks. They had a tough game.
They didn't have to leave, I think, since mid-August.
Yeah. They had a tough game against GWS, which they probably should have lost. An easy run against Port Adelaide, and they had 2 games in a month, or 30-ish days across that whole time, 35. Whereas we've played every week, travelled, and had to scrap like buggery in those 2 games. But I think in the end, especially a game at the MCG against a big Victorian club, a hostile crowd in front of 93,000, I think that experience, like who's going to be able to tell, who's going to be able to put it into something tangible, like how much that helped us on the weekend.
Yeah, I think that's an important moment. You know, quite a few Sydney people were sort of saying in the first quarter, shit, they played the MCG well. And I think that's been true. I think that's been true for a while. Yeah, well,
I don't want to ever hear Brisbane can't play at the MCG ever again because we lost 1 out of 4 this year by a point in a game we should have won.
1 out of 4 this year, and what was it? We lost the grand final by 4 points. Like, it's probably more just about, you know, and I don't want to dig up old bones, but like the stuff in previous years was more so just down to football mistakes and mistakes that we've made on any stadium.
Yeah.
Not just the MCG. It just happened to correlate. So, going back as far as that kind of calamitous Richmond game where we played some of our best football we had ever played on the MCG, and that, if you go back and look at that, that's probably a bit of a blueprint as to the stuff we've done this year, stuff that we did last week, stuff that we did on the weekend. So it's all kind of relative, but it's, you know, as a lot of our players and as Brownie has sort of said, things aren't as good as they seem and they aren't as bad as they seem. and that's probably a good. I mean, they're obviously better than they could possibly be expected right now, but within the throes of the season. So, I think, if we hear that again, we'll be firing shots from a gun.
All right, let's we'll get into some votes. But before we do, and we may chat about players and other people's votes here as well, but someone that hasn't made mine that I thought deserves a huge shout is Josh Dunkley, who, as you pointed out, almost had the quadruple double. He was just, 2 marks and a handball shy of it, but 11 tackles across the day. Obviously did a number on Heaney and other midfielders across the day. He's just, he's contested overhead marking for a midfielder and will just do whatever the team needs regardless. An amazing pickup, and I think the people speak about Geelong and the way they build their lists, but what we've done over the last however many years, Canole and Dom Ambrosio, the players we bought in like Archie and Dunkley and Neil Danaher, Charlie Cameron, and then just nailing those drafts. Like the draft that we got, obviously Berry and McCluggage. The next draft was Starcevic, Bailey and Cam Rayner. And then fast forward a couple of years, we get Lohmann and Darcy Wilmot in the same draft, which at the time was graded a D of a draft. Holy cow. Just like, it goes to show what nailing a couple of drafts and bringing in the right people to fill holes will do. And I hope
I think you've nailed it there. You've nailed it there in terms of looking at, so when you've kind of got the structure of a good list and you've got, essentially it was a good list. But when you're going, okay, so now we're in a draft, let's look at specific flashes of things that might be useful. And that's kind of what they did. They looked at Darcy Wilmot, they looked at Kyle Lohmann and said, are these guys super necessary for the team at the time? And the answer was probably not. But pick them up because they could, and they might be looking at where there might be drop-offs and stuff like that. And we've talked about that in the past. And
that's probably why we went for Connor McKenna, because they were probably sitting there thinking, well, Darcy Wilmot could take a year or two before he's on. So let's get Connor McKenna a ready-made player. Turns out, not surplus to requirements, but turns out he was ready to go. And, Lohmann thrown into the thick of it when McCarthy goes down with the knee. Wow.
Yeah, and it takes a bit of the pressure off, I think, as well. So it would, I can't imagine that there was a lot of. I mean, I know Kyle Lohmann probably would have felt pressure going into this year, but it's not as if that there was sort of like, you're a top 10 pick, you're a top 20 pick, you gotta go. Like, look at what this guy's done. Look at what this guy. A bit like sort of what was happening with Cam Rayner, and it's just been really good at recruitment. You could throw Dev Robb in there as well. He played in the grand final last year, and he'll probably not be at the club next year. But it's not. He's just been kind of unlucky.
I know.
We've had really good inside midfielders the whole time he's been there.
We've had really unlucky A-grade midfielders along the way.
Well, look at so we heard, and the nicest thing Max Gawn's actually ever said was, Fort's the best second ruck in the competition. That's what he actually said. That's the quote.
Yeah, so a lot of people, there'll be a lot of people listening that also listen to The Footy with Broden Kelly, which is a great, funny podcast. It's not super footy related, like it is, but it's not at the same time. But yeah, he did say that. He also had glowing praise for Henry Smith, which was a strange one because I can't imagine those two would have crossed paths. But he did also say that Oscar is the hardest ruck to play against. He may not be the most talented, and he says when you come up against the other star ruckman, you know what you're going to get because they just play their game, whereas Oscar sort of really goes to work on the other ruckman. It makes him impossible to play against. So he was full of praise for all of them, which was crazy. But he said, yeah, if there's a team that's going to lose their ruck before a grand final, it'd be Brisbane because Darcy Fort is ready to go.
Yep. And Darcy Fort was fantastic. I don't want to hear anything about Brodie Grundy being highly ranked player or winning the hitouts or this. It was not easy for Brodie Grundy at all. And I think Brodie Grundy in the grand final was an utter shell of himself. That was the first sort of couple of rounds of the season, or the first half of the season. Because Brodie Grundy was scary. The way he bullied Max Gawn at the beginning of the year and things like that. Yeah. I thought he was a bolt-on for All-Australian. And he just, he just wilted. He just wasn't there. There was no craft. There was none of the Brodie Grundy where you're sort of sitting there going, this guy is one of the best ruckmen in. You wouldn't know.
It's been a while since he's been at his best, like that 2017 to 2020 period where he was at his peaks, and then obviously he had that PCL and was never really quite right after that, because one of his biggest strengths was his work around the ground, and he just never got that back. And yeah,
I think also, as well as that, a lot of other ruckmen started to lift their load as well with that. So you've kind of got the dropping of 2 or 3% with the gaining of quite a lot, because I think a lot of ruckmen, we saw it with Steph Martin. He was great around the ground, but and there were times when we were playing two rucks with him and O, it seemed to be a lack of output from him because he wasn't very crafty as a forward. O was probably a bit better as a resting forward, and it just meant that he got a little bit lost. And then the games where Steph Martin would play full ruck, you'd sit there going, wow, look at him go. But I think it's now a gold standard that every ruckman is expected to kind of do that all the time. Joe pinch hit probably 30% of the game, 25% of the game, if that. But I don't know what I was talking about. Brodie Grundy sucked in again.
Another bloke, which we have spoken about Starcevic, but just utterly back to his best. I touched on it before, but the kids, for a long time we didn't rely on it, but you knew if Lachie Neale had a big game, it sort of meant we were going to win. And that was, you could put a correlation between those two fairly regularly a couple of years ago, but like just a full team performance, Jasper Fletcher, like we've said, doesn't lose his one-on-ones, just had some really good moments. Logan Morris, I mean, that story about his debut is going to get told forever and a day. And who would have thought he would be a key cog in our forward line in a grand final team? And if things go the way people are saying they're going to go, could be our next long-term key forward. So he had his moments. Obviously, Lohman. And
I'm so impressed with Logan Morris's ability to bounce back throughout the season, because he looked a bit tired.
Yeah.
In that sort of stretch of games, he looked tired, but he came back. He obviously, I think he had a week off and played the twos and
tore it up.
Something just happened, and he clicked and came back in, and what more do you want from a 12-year-old, basically?
Yeah. All right. Well, unless there's any other blokes you particularly want to touch on before we get into votes, for hoponbrewtours.com.au, book yourself a half or a full day tour, celebrate with some beers. Why not? Let's get into some votes. And
so just before we do, I'd like to make mention of Charlie Cameron's tackle pressure in the first half.
Yeah.
It's really good. We touched on Fletcher. I love Fletcher. I think he's so good. I think he's so reliable. And who else is missing? I mean, we talked a bit about Fort, but Fort rocks, man. He's great. Who else is on the team? I don't know.
Well,
McKenna came on, and
here's something that you can. I don't know if you want to say it on this podcast, but something you did say. You said you've got a smoky big call for next year regarding one of our players.
Yeah. We'll do that a bit later on.
Okay. All right. Well, for the votes, Starcevic is getting my 1, Archie the 2, and Ashcroft the 3. And there's Neil very stiff to miss out, like very stiff to miss out.
Throw a blanket over him, man.
Lohman obviously very stiff to miss out, but Starcevic, Archie, and Ashcroft for me.
Yeah, I've tossed up. I've struggled with this because
it's hard, isn't it? It's amazingly hard.
But I've found myself on Archie with the 1, Ashcroft the 2, and Starcevic with the 3.
Yeah, and
that's what I thought. That's what I thought in real time, and it's what I think looking back at. Like, Ashcroft stuff is so good, and it's almost, for a player that's played
30
a season and a half,
if that. I think by the time you add it all up, it's probably is a season.
You look at it and go, we take it for granted already. And we've lived through that with Lachie Neale of going, Lachie Neale got 35 touches and kicked a goal. Like, yeah, that's just what he does. Now we're sitting there going, okay, so Ashcroft can be surgically clean. Like he probably smells like a hospital. just able to pick up the ball anywhere, just get it anywhere, do anything. And it's like we've watched in real time over the past sort of 2 months, where his body has now caught up to his brain, where he's now doing the sort of stuff you do in like kind of, it's harder to do, where you will handball the ball to a player because you can see where they're going and you put them in a better spot and you make them go to the spot that makes like tactical sense. Which is not something, a lot of people just, they handball the ball to them, but he handballs it and it'll be weird. The guy will, instead of running forward, he'll have to run slightly this way. And it just gives him that extra bit of breathing room and stuff. Like, how often in that game did you see him handball to people under pressure that got caught?
Not once.
I mean, Sydney tackled about 5 times, but still, earlier on when he came back in, he was putting quite a lot of guys under pressure. And I think once everything sort of clicked back together, he's going to be unstoppable.
And he's obviously just made to win medals. Like, you saw it all through his junior career. He won everything that was able to be won in his underage. He's obviously done it again on the biggest stage. And then there's another one on the way, which is crazy to think, and we will get to that when we get to questions, because there is another bloody Ashcroft that's going to be joining this team who also loves winning medals. So that's
but I mean, Ashcroft was an absolutely worthy Norm Smith medalist, because there weren't junk time possessions, and that's not a slight on Lockie Neal or anyone else. But
no,
I think him and Starcevich, when the game was really needed to be won or needed to be finished off, they were really there.
And McCluggage in that first half as well. Like, he had a severely underrated first half, to the fact that they had to move Jordan onto him because he was everywhere. He was setting up play. He was biting off those kicks we spoke about. He really got the, as you said, when the game's up for grabs, not junk time, when it's there to be won, he did everything he possibly could.
He went a little bit unnoticed at the ground for me, just because it's sort of hard to see the in and under and the repeat efforts, particularly because we were behind the goals. So you don't see a lot of that kind of lateral running coming towards you, because it's just the guys getting slightly bigger and you feel the vision. So whilst moving, I assume. I suck at watching football at the ground level. I'll tell you what, I'm so bad at it. Less of that.
All right, well, we've got plenty of questions to jump into, thanks to Crisp Communications. And once again, a huge thanks out to Abby and the team from Crisp Communications for supporting us this year and for giving up the free Brisbane Lions Fancast stickers. Let's get into some questions. And if you've got a business that needs any sort of marketing, make sure Crisp Communications is the first place you visit at crispcoms.co. All right, a lot of this is going to be Joe Danaher related, because obviously he's a big talking point, and we've got a few questions about that, like, what are we going to do is the big one. So the Hand of Fear, who, the Hand of Fear, we've had some interesting discourse over the year, because he was one of the anti-Fagans across the year, but he is putting his hand up and saying he was wrong, so, respect where it's due there, and I'm not here to keep receipts and shove it in people's faces, but there's a lot of people.
I am, but I wasn't a part of that, so.
Okay, so if Danaher retires, do we go with the same run and gun style from the last few weeks and a chaos ball into the forward line like Richmond with a smaller forward line, or do we run with a 2-ruck system with like Darcy Fort and Oscar or Henry Smith, and until we're ready to trade in a ready-made replacement? It's an interesting question.
It is. Looking at the kind of the way the forward structure is at the more recently, is we've kind of crammed Charlie Cameron in there a little bit, which sounds insane, but bear with me here. Whoa, slow down. Because Lohman's basically playing the Charlie Cameron role, and Archie's been playing the Link McCarthy role. So what's Charlie Cameron been doing? He's had a new role that's been made for him that's probably a hybrid of the two of them. So I think there's a foreseeable thing where you can have Hipwood, Lohman, and those 3 guys and Rayner running around. You can do that. I mean, I'd like to see Smith play a bit more if that's the case, because I think Smith, probably more so than Ford, and I'm not throwing Ford away.
No.
He was very close to getting a vote. But I think if Henry Smith is going to be the next big thing, like Max Gawn said, and I don't know why I'm going with Max Gawn, but he's in the team of the century currently as a ruckman, reading in the record. So maybe he knows a thing or two about rucking. Maybe he's the guy.
He's obviously a long-term investment and project, and yeah, I dare say we'll see him take the field a little bit more next year, regardless of what happens with Joe. And at this stage of recording, we still have no idea, and we probably won't have any idea. It wouldn't be like till round 1 next year where he's suddenly just not named in the team sheet, because that's the sort of operator Joe is.
But how about you?
I can see both, but I can definitely see Fagen going to a 2 ruck forward situation. I don't know, but like he has been fond of that in the past. I don't know if he'll revert to that, but there's a lot of wait and see with Joe at this stage.
Yeah, and I think with Joe's he's got a backloaded contract, I'm pretty sure. So he's a lot of
set to make $1 million next year if he plays.
Yeah, so there's a lot of salary cap wiggle room there as well, and there's a lot of baiting. And I said this earlier on in the year because we've talked about how there's not a super large amount of drop off within our current squad in terms of it's not going to be like 03. It's not going to be like Richmond this year where they all just die. It's like, over the next few years, it's like Zorko, Neal, Danaher, and we're already kind of working on replacements as we're going currently. And that there is the Geelong and Sydney model to a T. It's we're bringing in guys to replace the guys that are going to drop off, and we're staggering it. So that's the model, and that's why I think the club is in exceptional shape. But I also think that with that comes the ability to go high key forward. Don't know who it is. You want to come here?
Yeah, and it'd be hard to say no, depending on who that person is and where they're coming from.
Will it be the Oscar Allen that was forecasted 6 months ago and makes no sense? Who knows?
I mean, I still highly doubt that situation. But
I know.
But as we spoke about before, there's no reason not to trust Dom Ambrosio, Steve Cannell, and Danny Daly if he, in fact, is still going to be in the Lions next year if he doesn't go across to West Coast. We did get a few questions through our speak pipe, so I'm going to start off with Aaron here.
Hey, boys. Great stuff all year. Thanks for all the content. Really quick story. Left home yesterday and my 3.5-year-old son was a massive Bulldog supporter just like his mum. Came home and he's changed to the Lions. Got him a jumper and a scarf today, so I think he's fully converted. Thanks for a great year.
Thank you, Aaron, and that's good to hear. I would say 3.5, that's an acceptable time to switch teams.
Before 10, I think is fine.
Oh, before 10. There was a time when I was 10, I was considering a swap.
Yeah, it never came up. Never came up for me. Now, I was listening to someone on SEN a couple of weeks ago about this particular thing about swapping teams after the age of 10, where, obviously tongue-in-cheek, but he said that it should be a mandatory 3-year prison sentence if you swap teams and you're over the age of 10. The only condition being if you have a son that plays for a team or a family member, you're allowed to swap. But even then, that was a point of contention. I think the other one was as well if you support a team and then another team turns up in your direct city and you opt to if you're a Tasmanian.
Yeah, I would cop that too. Yeah.
So I think they fall under the brackets of acceptable. But yes, 3.5 very much. Hopefully we can keep him until that the 10 point.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's obviously a few questions of dynasties and three-peats on the way as well. And just quickly, not funny, haha, especially not for Sydney, but Sydney didn't take Josh Dunkley as a father-son, and he's now won 2 premierships against Sydney for different clubs.
Yeah, they didn't match him. So he elected as a father-son and was taken at pick 25 and they didn't match it.
Yeah.
So, weird.
Oh, well, egg on their face. All right, here's one from Big Smitchy.
Is Callum Archie one of the most underrated footballers in the AFL at the minute?
Yes, he is.
I'd
Although
say pretty comfortably.
he's starting to get the recognition he deserves. Kane Corns has said it across the final series. He's the most underpaid player in the AFL, and we had a chat amongst ourselves and the people behind us at the ground that Calamachi, it took a while for people to warm up to him because he was, whether it was because he was
a bit nothing for 2 years.
He was just getting constantly played all over the ground, wing, half back, half forward. Where is this guy going to go? And never really got going. But now, and as Fagen's pointed out, and Calachi's come out and said he had the discussion. I think I can impact up forward. I think that's where I'm going to play my best footy. And boy, how has he?
Yeah, I think as well as that is, we picked him up from Gold Coast. He wasn't playing electric footy at the Gold Coast. He had a brother playing at West Coast who was a premiership player, I think. And you look at it and go, well, we gave him a pretty big chance and we retained him. So it's, yes, underrated and probably underpaid and stuff, but it's also repaying the faith that we showed in him as an individual over, what's going on, 5 years now, you reckon?
Yeah, close to
4 or 5 years. So, yeah, and I'll admit I was pretty doubtful about him when he first came in because I just thought he wasn't hard enough, and then he turned out to be one of the most, the toughest players in the team. So,
all right,
things can change.
Can they what? Here's one from Marcus.
Not a question, boys, but what a fucking game. Watching the replay now, Chalky and Hugh were massive to start the game. Probably deserve more kudos, really. Soak it all in. Let's fucking go.
That's a man. I think he sent that through yesterday morning and has obviously had a fun night, and obviously watching the replays, voice is a little bit hoarse, and I think that just captures a lot of people's feelings on a Sunday morning after the grand final. But yeah, he's right. Chalky and Hugh in that first half were immense.
Yeah, I think it's a good spot, and I thought we were going to get a 3-hour speak pipe, just the whole game, commentated by that guy, by Marcus. So, yeah, loved it.
Here's one from Ziggy, and a shout out to Ziggy. We've had many chats across the year, and especially the last few weeks. He's always keen for a chat, and he's a great fella, Ziggy. And
that's Zig from the Discord, right?
Yeah, and
I've never put that together because I've got a peanut for a brain.
Here we go.
G'day, boys. How bloody good was that?
Very.
Absolutely vindicating. Just all the years at the bottom, all the way to the top. Amazing. Can't get enough of it. My question for the pod today would be, where are we going to fit everybody for 2025? Got Levi coming in, all the boys back from their ACLs. Massive headache next year for the selection. But yeah, amazing. Congrats, everybody. Go Lions.
That is going to be a question. There's a few people that have jumped on, Twitter and Instagram that have said the same thing. Lockie Hudson on Instagram. Who do you think Levi and Kitty will replace next year? I doubt someone like Dizzy Gardner is going to be much of a factor in that selection process, but Tom Duday definitely. Link come back in. Levi and obviously Sam Marshall are going to come back in as midfielders. So, yeah, it's going to be a tough one. And then the question about Joe as well. So it's a good position to be in. And obviously, as we listened to SEN on the way home from the grand final, and Finey was having a rant about how unfair it is that you can win the premiership and get the best kid in the draft. And I do understand that point of view. I do. It is fundamentally unfair, but it swings and roundabouts.
Yeah, I think, I don't know if I said this earlier on, but if it's just our list is in good shape because we've made our list in good shape. We've managed it, and we're like an artisan sitting there crafting this team. It's not our fault we did a good job. It's not our fault. Do I think that they should probably have to pay more for really high draft pick people? Yeah, probably. But why is it now the thing that is being talked about? as in regards to where is everyone going to fit in, I've been saying it since the beginning of the year. I'm looking for more of a rotation thing of like you've got 27, 28 players that will filter in, and I don't think that I think we got pretty lucky this year. I know we got really unlucky in certain ways, but how many people were expecting Zorko to play 27 games and Froggy and like shit like that? Yeah. It's probably not. It probably doesn't happen a lot of the time. So I would be very much of the camp of just cycle them through.
I think Zorko will, and you never know what's around the corner because we could get to round 1 next year and another knee blows out or something like that. Touch on wood, that doesn't happen. But you'd have to imagine if things go the way they should, Kitty's back, Juday's back, Zorko's role will change. Probably McKenna, you'd have to make a decision about his future at the club when you've got Wilmot, Zorko playing an All-Australian halfback year, and then Kitty Coleman, who we all know what he's capable of. Link, how's he going to fit back into that forward line? Whose position does he take? Is it a Logan Morris? And we go with a smaller forward setup. And then Duday. Is this another year where we think surely Ryan Lester's like the first to go, like the first to bow out for this team? Or does Lester stay in and Payne has to fight for his spot because his body's letting him down again? It's crazy, isn't it, to think?
Yeah. They're kind of we've got more solutions, and I think there's also an element of not having to put as much pressure on the players coming back from ACLs, because there is a bit of a weird kind of statistic in terms of players coming back and the amount of time off they've had and the amount of rehab, where it's like once you reach a point, kind of it's like the risk return is at its minimum, but before that it's quite a lot higher. I can't quite remember. I read a study on it at some point in time when probably we had all 5 of them at once. But it could be the sort of thing where you go, well, there's a 5% risk of playing Tom Duday in round 1. So by the time we get to round 4, there's a 0% risk. So you just do that. I wouldn't be necessarily risking players early on in the season because I don't think it's super necessary. So does Kitty Coleman come back in round 3 or 4, given he's had a setback? I can see Link McCarthy coming straight back in because he's basically the most professional human seemingly on earth, except for Will Ashcroft. But yeah, in terms of where they all fit in, I don't know. They're all. It's negligible with a lot of players, because a lot of people pre-season had Kitty Coleman as a All-Australian, and Zorko won that award. So yeah, and I think probably, is Kitty Coleman an improvement over Zorko? Maybe. I don't know.
Maybe not. It's an unknown quantity at this point. You'd have to say, on face value, he probably is over McKenna, but then the balance and everything. But it's an amazing problem to have. It's an amazing problem to have, and I guess that leads into a few of the questions we've got of Emma. Can this be the start of a three-peat? And then Roy Boys, is this dynasty worthy? And I mean, let's not get too ahead of ourselves, I guess, is probably what what I'll say there.
It absolutely could be. It absolutely could be. It could, yeah, for sure. There's no real reason why it couldn't be. And I think what Lachie Neale said about the Joe Danaher thing is I'll be in his ear about going back to back. And the fact that he said that, the day after the grand final shows that they know and there's no way that the team don't know as much as we all do. Yeah. And that, the team's too talented to win just one flag, or like the shit that gets talked about with Melbourne.
Yeah.
And I think our list is better than Melbourne's was when they won a premiership. To be perfectly honest, I think we've got more threats than they did. They've got probably some players with a higher ceiling, maybe. But if you match them up, it's probably pretty close.
Yeah.
And they won one flag. Essendon in 2001 won one flag, and they were heavy underachievers. So I'm not saying to take anything for granted, but it's nice to hear the players sort of go, "Fuck this, let's back up.
Yeah,
let's go." They're playing footy, and I think one of the great things is that I don't think we can have as poor a start to the season as we did this year. So,
well, you never know. Like, it's so, like, as we know, they're so hard to win. And, like, I guess 01, 02, 03, when I was 11 to 13, respectively, I took those for granted. I was just a kid. And at that stage, I was a footy fan. I was a big footy fan, but it got to the point where I was obviously just used to seeing my team in the grand final. And it was a bit of a shock when we lost the one in 04. I was like, oh, that's weird. We don't do that normally.
You don't say, dickhead.
So now, being a full nuff and, being a member for the best part of 20 years and sitting through the shit, and now seeing the last 6 years where we've been genuine, well, we haven't been genuine contenders for the last 6 years, but, the last 3 or 4 where we've put our hat in the ring, just so how hard it is to get. And there's always going to be another couple of teams that are just as hungry as well, if not hungrier, because they're looking to taste that success. Now that we've tasted it, does our appetite drop off? It's all this stuff to think about over the next 6 months. Vince had a similar question. He's the bloke that had the beers after the Sydney game. He asked about this grand final. He said he had a lot of celebratory beers after the game. He said he's back-to-back on the cards. Let's just see. All right. We've touched...
If I'll put a bit of a comparison in place. So if you look at... I know the Richmond one's a little bit different, but if you look at the Lions and the Hawks, and when they won their grand final, so the Lions kind of had their first little dabble the toe in the old grand final pool in sort of the late 90s. They didn't make a grand final, but they almost did. Different system back then, so I think some of the fixturing was a bit weird. And then they obviously won in 1, 2, and 3. With Hawthorn, they won the grand final kind of unexpectedly in 08. And I think that's probably a better kind of comparison to us, because it's sort of, although I think they played finals the year before, but if you kind of shift ours, we kind of overachieved a little bit. And I've talked about this before, where we kind of cropped up in 19, and then in 2020, no one liked us because of COVID, and no one was much liking anybody at COVID. Don't blame them. But everyone was sort of saying, oh, you've been hand-gifted a premiership here. And we weren't really ready.
No, of course not.
The normal season, we weren't ready. But by that time, the charm's kind of worn off. And it's come back a little bit in dribs and drabs I've noticed over this season. But to have that kind of, that overachieve and you're sort of around it, and then it drops off a bit and then you come back, there's no reason why, there's plenty of reasons why we won't win 3 premierships in a row. But there's definitely as good a chance as any team.
Yeah.
Really. And I know, the chance is low. But what do you want from me?
Miller time. Was Kai robbed of the norm? Accordingly, he had a bet on, so he says he was.
No,
and then
he wasn't, but
he's in the conversation. He only ended up with a 1 vote, which is fine, for a kid. All right, Paul, do you think this is the second best premiership after 2001, considering the circumstances, coming down from 4.5 wins, having to go to Perth twice, Adelaide 3 times, 3 weeks in the row in the final series, and all the ACLs? Add it all together. The whole Dancing on Thin Ice thing. And when that documentary comes out, it better fucking be called Dancing on Thin Ice.
You're not going to call it There and Back Again, A Hobbit's Tale by Chris Fagen?
Close second.
Yeah. That one's a bit too wordy. They probably have some New Line Cinema issues with copyright, I guess. I don't want to rank premierships. I'm not in that wheelhouse.
I mean,
because I think it's different.
Yeah.
Because to me, I still enjoy 2002 the most.
Yeah.
Not the whole, because I don't remember fuck all from the season, but that game is just, I still think is the best game of football.
It is amazing, isn't it?
And it's pure football, and it's an objective watching it, going okay, Collingwood were really overperforming in that game and that sort of thing, so it doesn't really matter. But it's probably would it be the least likely? I don't know. Essendon was such a powerhouse in 2001 as well.
Yeah.
But then 2003 we lost the prelim. We lost the qualifying final and had to go the long way. So, yeah, I'm not ranking them, but it was pretty good.
It was pretty good.
All of them were pretty good.
Something we have already touched on. Joel says, when did you both decide that the Lions couldn't lose? For him, it was not until 10 minutes left in the game. And I think it was the Kalachi streaming into goal and at 3/4 time when we were 73 points up. I thought, we are really going to have to fuck this up if we're going to lose here, like really badly. And Sydney's going to have to turn something on in a big, big way. And they just kept chipping it around like that was going to get them back into the game.
Yeah, so we've talked so when Jared Berry kicked the goal, I thought we were going to win. But when Kalachi ran in, I knew we weren't going to lose.
Derek, there has been a huge lack of respect for Chris Fagen from so-called experts, David King, who says he is a good man and manager, but crap tactically. Given the Hawks' decline coincided with Fagen joining the Lions, maybe it was he and not Clarkson that was the mastermind behind their three-peat. I think, the list changeover had a bit to do with that as well. And I mean, look at what Sam Mitchell has done with the Hawks.
Yeah, I don't think that's a correlation really, but I get where you're going.
Yeah,
I like where you're going with it, but
just quickly, we should say Chris Fagen, Coach of the Year, by the way.
Yeah.
We haven't touched on that because it came out just after we did the last podcast. That's crazy. That's and amazing, obviously.
He won by a lot as well.
Yeah. John Longmire said, I thought for all money Sam Mitchell was going to get that and would have rightfully deserved it.
Yeah, I don't think Sam Mitchell was robbed because there are people suggesting that Sam Mitchell was robbed, but it's like...
It's voted on by the coaches, and so you can't really argue with it. And I mean,
are you voting on like potential? Because he'll get his chance for sure.
I guess it's the same way that Fags won in 2019, bringing a team from second last to second on the ladder, or 15th to second on the ladder, whatever it was. He won it for that reason. I think people thought, well, Sam Mitchell's done the same. Look at what he's done.
He really didn't, though, did he? Only finished 7th.
Yeah, but just defied all expectations. But yeah, I mean, you look at however much you want to for Chris Fagen, and the season, the racism scandal, the grand final loss, Nicole Duncan, the injuries, the poor start, the final series on the road, and he was so consistent the whole time. So consistent the whole time in his messaging and everything he had to say. And, we've had terse conversations with people about where we sit on Chris Fagen. I must admit, when the news came out, 2 weeks ago or something, that they were going to extend him again for 2026, I even thought, well, it's probably a bit early. Like, let's see how 25 plays out a little bit before we rush onto this. But no, fuck it. Give the man a life.
I think there's a kind of a not a stigma, but like around the idea of coaching into your last year, where it can kind of cause a bit of hubbub.
Yeah, and I understand that as well.
Unnecessary noise, which is what's going to happen with old Kenny
and John Longmire,
and John Longmire as well. So, I must admit, like, you question things.
Of course you do.
When you're watching it and you're seeing the same errors and stuff like that. And, of course, one of my older brothers is over in Europe and is very heavily, like, he coaches football, like soccer and stuff like that. So I think there's a bit more understanding with that sport and the way that is coached, that there's a more of a trust process. With certain ones, it's less yelly, let's say, and then there's plenty of yelly coaches. But I think in Aussie rules, the idea that you have a coach that's going to yell at you and point and, get up here and say you're doing, like, that's what people have seen. And you think of like Ron Barassi and you think of things like that, and famous things that are generally coach related are those types of things. And it's hard to have a new person that goes, all right, this is what we're going to do, and this is how I'm going to trust you, because football is, I assume, a very hard game to coach because the field is enormous. And even if I watched every game at ground level, I still would have no idea what the hell is going on. But there's got to be an element of going, and I think this is probably what's changed with Chris Fagen, is that he trusts his players, but the ones he trusts most to impart his messages on the field has changed slightly. This is speculative. I don't know because I don't know, but trusting guys like Frog and Harris Andrews rather than going like, I don't know who we would trust in the past, but just maybe shifting a couple of the structural pillars and going, okay, these are the ones that need to be the trusted ones to then allow, the coaching and the stuff. And we, I think a big thing with a lot of people around Chris Fagen is going, all right, what's going on with the assistant coaches around? And we've seen changes in that in the last year. So Dale Morris was a development coach last year, is now a line coach. And then you've got the unlikely bulky hero.
Oh, yes. Secret
Stewie
weapon.
Prowling the MCG. And I think Trent Cotchin's probably done quite a bit in terms of how weird does it see him in a Lions get up as well.
It's crazy.
On the bench. But they were all there, and I think they've all impacted. And it does a lot to abate people that go, he doesn't have a strategic mind. He's not this, and his game day coaching or whatever. But maybe he thought that as well, and he said, okay, well, I'm going to get Stewie Jew in. I'm going to get people. And like, I don't want to jump scare you, but could you see Stewie Jew taking over in a couple of years' time?
Yeah, potentially, yeah.
And it's not to say like coaches are always learning, but maybe Stewie Jew will also learn off Fagen some things in this if he goes full time over the next couple of years to go, okay, where are some insufficiencies that I had in coaching the Gold Coast, and how can I learn from this different style and then become a better coach? Who knows?
I really do hope he has a more full-on role for us next year.
Yep.
And
I'd like to see him with more permanency, and Koch can flit in and out if he wants to. But I think if you're looking at a coaching brigade that includes Dale Morris, Stewie Jew, Chris Fagen, and Cam Bruce has had a really good year too.
Yep.
And whomever the forward coach is that I
Murray
can't...
Davis.
Murray Davis. So sorry, Murray. It's a much stronger coaching contingent than it probably was last year.
And there's still, as I sort of touched on before, a big question about Danny Daly and what he's going to do, if he's going to stick around or go over to West Coast and head that lot up, who have just announced Andrew McQualter as their head coach. So,
well, funnily enough, I heard whispers of him in Collingwood as well.
Yeah, I don't know that that's going to...
This makes me sick.
Yeah, we'll see.
Although we did get Greg Swan from then, so, there's your swings and roundabouts.
James Barron, how many people booed Tina Arena? Great season, guys. Congrats. Not too many people where we were. I understand there was a bit of controversy about her selection for entertainment, but I didn't hear anything from where we were sitting.
Yeah, I know the name, but I don't. I think it's like, is that Tina Arena? And like Tina Turner, and then we had to talk about like what, and I just was like, man, I have no idea what the hell is going on here. Bring back Kiss.
JC, a very similar question to one we just had before. David King.
And it's another Tina Turner question.
No.
Tina Arena.
David King set his criticism up nicely in the lead up. If we win, we should have with the list, so no credit needs to be given. And if we lost, it's the ultimate failure with this list. What does Fags have to do to win some respect amongst Melbourne media, particularly Kingy? I mean, there's not much more he can do.
Kingy's not a coach.
No.
So what the fuck does he know? And also, so I was talking to my other brother, and he said David King was not a very tactically aware player when he played. Not at all. So, just goes to show. I don't know who decided that David King would be the fountain of knowledge, but someone did. But with that, Fagen built the list. So if you're going to say sub in, Chris Scott and go, all right, off you go. Let's see what Chris Scott would have done in 2017. Bring him in then.
Yeah.
In a parallel unit. Can someone do one of those things? Have physics and physicists gotten that good that we can create a simulated world of what happened back then, put Chris Scott in there and just see what happens?
All right, a couple
No,
more.
they haven't, have they?
No. So, and if they do, they're not going to make it specifically for AFL situations.
It's probably a little bit low bar there.
We're going to rattle through these last couple here. Mr. I, no question, just want to give a big one to all the Fagen, Hipwood, and Darragh Joyce haters. None of it would be possible without them. Dennis Roberts, how about a bit of love for the guys on the lower tiers like Noah Answorth, Fletcher, Froggy? The top level talent is elite, but the whole club brought this home. Even the top-up players who came in during the mid-season draft. And yeah, it's no surprise, and you probably noticed that when they were reading out each player to come up and get their medal, I saved my biggest cheer for Froggy Lester.
Yep.
And I think there's a lot of Lions fans right now listening that share that same love for the guys like Froggy and for Zork and the guys that have been there through the shit. And it's a bit of a shame Darcy Gardner misses out, but he's there for it. And yeah.
See how we go next year. I think we probably forgot to mention Noah much in the game stuff, but he was just ever present. I know he's sharing that vacuum cleaner around, and that's all he's going to be in my mind. Like, his ball use has been a lot better. He's both sides, so yeah. He was there and did his role expertly.
Certainly did. And Froggy, as we know, is just an all-time favourite of not only me, but plenty of Lions fans, and had a fantastic final series and a fantastic grand final, and has signed another 1-year contract. So it's all just amazing stuff. It really is. That'll do for the questions. Thanks to crispcommunications.com, crispcoms.co. The aftermath of the grand final, two very, I guess, tear-jerky moments. One was obviously Fags and Lee Matthews, which is my favourite image of the day, of them arm in arm just crying. And the other is Oscar McInerney and the way he conducted himself all week, all game, after he was just so happy for Darcy Fort. And a lot of, as I said to you off air, the West Coast supporters are comparing the way Oscar, went about his business on Grand Final Day compared to Andrew Gaff on Grand Final Day, who just was sour face the whole time. And Oscar what a bloke. What a guy.
It would suck. It would suck.
You wouldn't know it, though. You wouldn't know it.
No. And the thing is that there are people questioning whether it was performative or not. And I don't know. Oscar's so weird that maybe it wasn't. Like, the thing is it's, let me put it this way. I consider Daniel Bradshaw a triple premiership player, but he only played in 2.
Yeah.
Same with the Scots. So it kind of, will he be a premiership player? Like, he is.
Yeah, in all of our eyes, he's a premiership player.
Everyone will know the contribution that he made. So I don't, both John Longmire and Chris Fagen said in the lead up, they wished that the squad members got medals.
Yeah. And
I think that we're not too far away from that. I know it would have to be some kind of thing. Does Zane Zakostelski deserve a medal? Probably not. Like, do you have to play a certain number of games in the first team? Or is it, that sort of thing? I don't know. Sorry, I didn't mean to do a drive-by on Zane there.
Paul's easy.
That was just...
Yeah, I get what you're saying.
It was just the I couldn't think of anybody else. Which is probably a poor indictment on everybody else. So, anyway, I'm going to stop talking about this. The Fagen and Lee Matthews moment was pretty mega.
Yeah.
And what you've heard what Chris Fagen, like, what that interaction was and what it's been for quite some time.
Yeah.
The showing of faith by Lee Matthews telling Fagen that he is a premiership coach. He just doesn't have the premiership yet. And that probably was the moment that, you did it. I don't think I've seen a moment like that in football. And I don't know how often that could happen again. You know? It would, like, when has that happened where you've had a triple premiership coach from 20 years ago on the bench with such a relationship with the current coach? I just don't think that happens.
And one of the all-time figures in AFL, like
Yeah.
player of the century, one of the biggest names. His statue is right outside gate 4 of the bloke. Yeah.
You weren't standing there. You kept getting asked to move. Maybe at the Lee Matthews statue. Where are you?
Well, everyone wanted the photo with the Lee Matthews statue, and fair enough too. Yeah, just that image, I think, is the one that is going to stick with me from that game, is those two.
Yeah. I was going to ask you what your favourite kind of moment was, and because that was mine.
Yeah.
And you
I think it'll be a lot of people's favourite moments. That one for sure. To go along with.
Closely followed by him getting absolutely dunked with the Gatorade.
Yeah.
But yeah, I can't see that moment happening at any other club at any other time. You know, like where was John Worsfold when fucking
Simo won
West
it.
Coast won in or where was Mick Malthouse when probably coaching Collingwood? But you know, it's just so weird. It doesn't really make any sense how that happened, but it completely works.
Yeah.
And I understand that that Lee's on the board and stuff like that, but it was perfect.
Yeah, it really was. The other moment was Fags getting Zork up for the captain with the captains in the presentation of the cup, and the story behind that we've heard is that when Zork's handed over the captaincy, Fags said to him, like, when we win it, you're going to be the first one up there, and held his word, a few years later, which is amazing stuff as well.
Yeah, I think Fagen's been pretty coy about that sort of situation, and it's something that I think we've echoed, where I probably don't... Zorko showed more leadership in this last year than I think he probably did whilst he was captain, but Fagen's like, there was no one else really. There was no one else to be captain at the time. We needed someone, and he was there. And that was kind of probably in some times where Zorko was at his least, whatever.
He's certainly his least desirable.
Yeah. Where he wasn't... There was a time where he wasn't... You weren't proud of him as a captain.
Yeah, of course.
When you supported the club. Whereas I think well and truly this season, you can be proud of him. Proud to say that he's a player in your team. It was a bit, and yeah, he's turned it around.
He certainly has.
Turned it around.
And one of the ones that thoroughly deserves that premiership medal.
Yeah, more than a lot. I mean, I know deserving is a hard word when you're looking at things like this, because they're very much hard earned, but we're glad he got there.
Yeah. Him, Froggy. Harris has been there 10 years as well, and been a terrific leader from day one.
Well, even Joe Danaher. Like, Joe Danaher's gone through a pretty long-winded trip to get to this point. So and I know not all of it has been with us, and he was very clear to say that after the game. He said, I came in when things were already bloody guns blazing, so there's other people who've done it harder than me. Charlie Cameron came to a wooden spoon club.
Coming off a grand final.
Yeah, coming off a grand final. Obviously, did he miss the camp, or was he there for the camp?
No, so he would have been traded out, and then the camp would have happened.
Oh,
he's timed that well.
Yeah. Lockie Neal coming to a team that had 10 wins in 2 seasons.
But he knew.
They're all there. People talk about the Lockie Neal era, and it's like, yeah, it's the Fagen era. Not Lockie Neal's era.
One last thing in the aftermath. Did you watch John Longmire's press conference? Because that was brutal.
Yeah.
That was brutal.
Yeah, it wasn't.
He and John Longmire held himself as well as anyone possibly could in that situation. Your teams just had their pants pulled down. You're trying to answer questions from journalists, and in the next room you hear enormous celebrations. You hear them singing the song, like, basically throughout the whole press conference. It just...
Why did... Like, 2 questions. Why is the rooms right there?
I know.
And B, how has this never happened before?
Well, I mean, I don't know if it was like they changed it this year or the celebrations were just that loud that they were coming down the hallway. But yeah, it was. Man, that is salt in the wound that you don't need. But he held himself amazingly.
I feel quite bad for at the same time, it's feeling bad is kind of futile because if he'd won, then we'd feel bad. I think Sydney had more to lose in this grand final than we did.
Yeah,
to be perfectly honest.
I think whoever lost was gonna. They were
gonna cop it for sure, but I think they lost in the exact way that they would not have wanted to.
Yeah.
So whereas I think we would have been able to hide behind we've kind of burked it up in the season and we've travelled week, and if we'd been beaten by 60 points, it would have been a bit like GWS in 19, or we've gone the hard way and it hasn't worked. Back up again. And it probably would have been damaging, but probably not as damaging as this is to Sydney.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I don't hate Sydney.
I really like Sydney.
Few players I don't like. No one likes Papley. We had a bit of a funny moment at the game where I was like, I feel a bit bad for him. You're like, I feel bad for
Parker.
Luke Parker. And I was like, what? He's one of the ones I don't. He looks like a tradie that would rip you off. No questions.
I like Luke Parker. I like the way he plays his footy.
Fix your toilet, and he'd rewire it so that it came out the other one or something like that.
But no, I like Sydney, and in this for the same reasons that Fags and Lachie Neale articulated. They're just, they've had a strong culture for such a long time. They've had that sort of no dickhead policy.
How's Papley survived?
Well, yeah, I don't know, but they're always there. They're always contending.
No dickheads, plural.
Yeah, we're allowed to have one. I like the way they play their footy. I love watching Errol Goulden and Chad Warner and Isaac Heaney play footy when they're on. They are fantastic. Will Haywood is a really good footballer. I like watching. I think Lewis Melican he's probably one of the most improved players this year. And just players like, Braden Campbell is really fun to watch.
If I could sort of, if there were sort of players I'd take out of their team, I don't know where they'd go, but I like James Rowbottom.
Yeah,
I think he's good. He kind of had a bit of a mare-ish, but they're fine. Don't need to talk about them too much. But Isaac Heaney is weird. He looks like he's made of wax. I don't quite understand how he looks, waxy.
But
if you know, you know.
Yeah, when he's on, he's the best player in the comp, and unfortunately for him and for Sydney, that he was nowhere near it on Saturday. Oh, well, this has been a long one for us. We try and keep it relatively bite-sized, but we are pushing the 2-hour mark now.
Are we? Shit. Oh, yeah, it's fucking 11 o'clock.
So once again, a massive thank you to everyone that has been listening across the year. We will do another couple of episodes. We'll do a full season review. We'll go through some other players and maybe we'll break it down into chunks of rounds, or maybe we'll go through player by player. Not really sure at this point. Maybe we'll do a grand final rewatch with our commentary. We've got all of this to decide and more. And I will. I'm not gonna give it lip service this week. So if I'm gonna do an AFLW video, they had a massive weekend and a huge win on Sunday. So I'm gonna chuck something up on YouTube where I do a bit of a chat about the AFLW. But what I will say is the way they organised that so that the men's team comes back, because it was a piss that they couldn't be down there to watch the game on Saturday. But the way they organised it,
it was fucking dumb.
The men's team comes back. And if you wanted to be there for the celebrations at Brighton Homes Arena, you had to buy an AFLW ticket, which meant the crowd at Brighton Homes was absolutely huge. And they pulled off one of the great wins against the arch enemy in Adelaide. That was fantastic. If you haven't had the chance to watch that game, please do, because it was absolutely huge, so good. Tay Smith and Ruby Sparker are really coming along this year. Tay Smith especially, with some huge clunks at the end. So I'll do a bit of a video on YouTube where I go a bit more into AFLW, because just haven't been able to give it the service it deserves at the moment. And well, that's because we've just.
I don't think you can be blamed because we just want to flag.
Yeah,
so.
I know, but still, it's we are that close to the McClellan Trophy again. What,
Yeah.
one hand on $1 million bucks.
Well, isn't it home and away result though? Yeah.
Yeah, so I think probably Port was a big threat. Melbourne's probably not going to be an issue. But yeah.
Well, I mean, to put it in perspective, the last couple of weeks I haven't watched the full Premier League games. I've just watched highlights of my team, and they've played fucking Manchester City and stuff. And I'm like, God, haven't even bothered watching that because I'm not important. But
All right.
Manchester City, what a bunch of wankers.
Anything you want to say before we sign off this premiership episode of the Brisbane Lions Fancast?
No, but just obviously, good job, team. But if we've forgotten anything, just let us know, because it's obviously hard to kind of hard to remember everything. And to any listeners, get in touch if you've got any moments that you had that stood out to you. It'd be nice to read through that,
for sure.
Hear that, because you and I, Brooksy, we're pretty weird. We kind of just digest things in our own way. Other people do it in a different way, and I'd like to hear. So maybe less kind of newsreadery outside the Royal Derby style shit that I saw on the news. Just some coherent, poetic sentences about experiences that you might have had that might have been special to you. I think would be cool.
Yeah, definitely.
It doesn't have to be at the game. It can be at your home. It can be if you're watching in prison. It can be wherever. So
sure. Get in touch. You can shoot us an email, blfancast@gmail.com. You can go through the website, or of course at the socials, just blfancast, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Reddit, join the Discord. It's all there. It's all there, and it's been another great year, and there's still a few more episodes to come where we wrap a neat little bow on everything, and then now we get into the silly season trade and draft news. At this stage,
I love trade and draft news. It's my favourite time of the year.
Well, we still don't know what Joe's doing at this point. His dad has been on SEN this morning.
I fucking hate trade time. It's so futile.
We'll see. You never know.
It's where the Tom Morrises and Mitch Clearys and Sam McClure's of the world really shine, and I hate it because they're not actually shining.
All right, well, in the words of Winston Smith's son, go Lions, Brisbane Lions will kick you in the balls.